Hello and welcome to this week's Geek TV. I'm Alex Fletcher, your host, as we take a look back at this week's Doctor Who episode, In the Forest of the Nights. Joining me to discuss this week's episode, as always, is Digital Spy's TV editor Morgan Jeffrey. Say hello, Morgan.
Hello.
So this week, the Doctor, Clara and Danny Pink found themselves battling the most unusual of enemies, trees. Morgan, did this episode leave you feeling happy and green-fingered, or would you have preferred an hour of being hit by Alan Titchmarsh with a rusty trowel?
Well, I wouldn't quite go that far. The interesting thing is, Doctor Who, a lot of time people say, it's a kids' show. And then other people say, no, it's a show aimed at, the whole family. I think this is an example of what Doctor Who would be like if it were squarely aimed at kids. Maybe it's just the presence of the pupils, the school children, but this felt like a far more kid-orientated episode to me. The concept I thought was quite interesting. This idea that you wake up and the whole world's covered in this forest. That was kind of, if you're being generous, that's kind of reminiscent of classic children's novels, as kind of a little bit Roald Dahl-esque, a little bit even kind of C.S. Lewis. But to me, a lot of this episode was reminiscent of the worst kind of kids' TV, where everything's very kind of overly theatrical, some of the performances, and it just lacks any real menace and any real bite, I think.
We've got to mention the end, which felt a little bit weird at the
final
end.
Scene, yeah.
Final scene with the girl, and she suddenly found his sister, who we'd never seen before, so it didn't really make much sense. I mean, we'd barely seen her mum in the episode.
The whole missing sister angle was a little baffling to me, I think, to you as well, because as far as I can gather, that was the reason that these aliens had somehow latched onto this girl, and that's why they could communicate with her, because of the trauma of her losing her sister. And at the end, her sister rematerializes, and was she in that bush the whole time?
Yeah.
I really didn't understand what was going on there, where her sister had been, what was going on. It was, as I say, baffling.
It felt very brief, everything that was going on, the Maeve's sister's thing, the animals, which appeared very briefly. The only thing that was sort of holding it together was the storyline with the trees, which obviously wasn't particularly interesting, I don't think.
There's that thing they say in kids' films, isn't it, like, contains mild peril. And the peril here was very, very mild, because there's no villain as such, there's no monster, it lacks a monster. The only recognisable threat we have is the wolves very briefly, and then the tiger even more briefly. And even more, I think, an even bigger problem with this is that if you think about it, the Doctor doesn't do anything. He turns up, kind of, runs around a bit, and then essentially waits, and he doesn't save the day. He's not in any way instrumental to saving the day. He just kind of watches, and the world saves itself. And so, the episode really lacks any kind of purpose, any kind of driving force. It's just a bit of a pointless runaround that resolves itself, and that's always a big story issue, when the story would have unfolded exactly the same way if the Doctor wasn't there. Yeah. And that's very much the case within the Forest of the Night.
The dynamic between Danny and Clara was quite sweet this week. Are we been set up for a decision, do you think, where Clara's going to have to choose between Danny and her adventures in space?
I think we're heading for something a little more complex than, just, who do I love more, the Doctor or Danny? And I think if Clara leaves, if and when she does leave, it will be an outside influence that causes that, rather than her relationship with Danny.
It kind of leads on to one of the first questions from our viewers this week. Lewis Adams asks, do you think Jenna Coleman will leave at the end of this season? And if so, how?
No.
Only because you've been on the set of the Christmas special, so you know she's there.
Well, yeah, but it has also been publicly announced that she is going to be in the Christmas special, and having been on the set, I can confirm that that's not some ruse, and that she is currently, or well, at least she was currently filming the Christmas special. So unless
they've just paid her to hang out on the set.
Just a full, intrepid journalists. No, at the very least, she's doing something in the Christmas special. Yeah. So whether or not Clara's in the Christmas special, it's Doctor Who, anything's possible. Jenna Coleman certainly is. So my instinct is that Clara will be in the Christmas special, and my instinct is also that will be her final episode. But it'll be interesting to see how the end of this series, whether it's, it has its kind of resolution and its payoff and it ends there, and then Christmas is something entirely different, or whether because it's quite a short gap if you think about it. It's November the 8th, I think the final episode of this series goes out, and then it's only, a little over a month until Christmas. Maybe we'll end on a cliffhanger, and then that'll drive us straight into Christmas and Clara's possible departure.
Is Danny going to be in the Christmas special?
That I don't know, actually. I did not spot Samuel Anderson on set.
It's not been announced.
And it's not been announced one way or the other, so maybe the finale will involve something happening to Danny Pink, and then that will lead into Clara's departure.
But I think it'll be sad if she does go at Christmas, because I think there's a lot more potential with this dynamic.
I agree.
With the three of them.
Yeah.
How do you imagine she would leave?
Well, as I say, I don't think it's as simple as...
They don't die, do they? Companions.
The companions,
before.
A couple of companions in the history of Doctor Who have died, but rarely do they actually die. You know, like Amy and Rory technically died, but they didn't really. And, you know, Rose technically died, but she didn't really. And also, I'll be very surprised if Clara just, you know, gets properly offed. I don't see that happening. But I also don't see her settling down, you know, with Danny Pink. Usually, you know, the way a companion leaves is either, you know, the Doctor leaves them behind. Don't see that coming here. They choose to leave the Doctor, which the show's kind of played with that already.
Yeah.
So I don't see them going down that route. Or they're just cut off from the Doctor in a way, and they can, for whatever reason, they can never continue their travels with him. You know, whether that's Rose, who is literally physically cut off from him, or Catherine Tate's character Donna, who kind of lost her memories, and for you know those kind of reasons she couldn't continue on with him. So maybe they're driving for something along those lines.
We've got one more question this week, a bit of a controversial one, but do you like Steven Moffat as the writer for Doctor Who? There's two questions. Someone else asked, do you think we need a change of showrunner? Do you think Steven needs to step down at any point in the future?
It's tough to say, really, because I think at the end of the Matt Smith era, I might have been tempted to say that, because it did feel like a little bit like, you know, his story potential was running dry, and that you know, there was an over-reliance, as I said, on certain characters, certain ideas. But I do feel like, although some of those issues still crop up, you know, the Peter Capaldi era has given the Steven Moffat era a fresh lease of life, I feel. So in much the same way as I would love to see, whether or not she does, I would love to see Jenna Coleman stick around. I think Steven Moffat should, well, we know for a fact, I think that he's sticking around for the next series. Yeah. And I'm glad he is. You know, I don't see that he needs to go anytime soon. Sorry, haters.
I think the only issue would be if Moffat is not enjoying it as much. But I can't imagine he isn't. He's the biggest fan of the show, and that enthusiasm, I think, attracts more people to write for the show. It attracts better people. Nobody sells the show quite like he does, around the world. And
because it is a lot of work, isn't it, Doctor Who? So you know, it's a big job to take on, particularly when you're also running another big show as he is in Sherlock. So you know, I'm happy for him to stay, as you say, as long as he wants to, really.
Yeah.
But if he is ever losing enthusiasm for the job, then that is the time to quit. And I think he has said, you know, things along those lines himself, that you know, he'll keep doing it until it's not fun anymore. Yeah. And I don't think we're there yet. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll see you again in 7 days' time for the exciting new episode Dark Water. And until then, goodbye.